掩护敌人也跟不破的。
On the 1st of October 1949, Mao Zedong declared the People's Republic of China. The Civil War was finally over, Chiang Kai-shek had fled to Taiwan, and the Communist Party was now in charge of China.
A few days before Mao declared the PRC, the Communist Party leaders held a conference to decide their future policy. The conference drew up a common program outlining the party's aims and intentions for the future.
It's just a little touch of fate, it'll be okay. It sure takes its precious time, but it's got rights and so have I.
What do you mean?
Democratic dictatorship means that the country will be a democracy to those who support the Communist Party, and will be a dictatorship for those who oppose the party. Peasant land ownership means that we must prosecute all landlords, take their land and all their money, and give it to the peasants who have nothing. Then, to make China strong, our economy and industry, especially heavy industry, must catch up with the Western countries. In 1950, when the land reform law was passed, land was taken away from the landlords and given to the peasants. However, not many peasants had enough equipment to farm in their own land, so they formed mutual aid teams. During the first 5-year plan, the government and the CCP made efforts to join mutual aid teams together into lower stage cooperatives. After that, they began joining lower stage cooperatives together into higher stage cooperatives. China was focused on increasing their outputs of heavy industry by double, and they met most of their aims. During the Great Leap Forward, the higher stage cooperatives joined to become communes. This made sure that nobody was distracted from work. The Backyard Steel campaigns also increased China's steel output to 11 million tons.
What do you mean? Basically, it means that people will be allowed to express their views through whatever they choose. Men and women will become equals, and they will have the same jobs and contribute equally to the country.
For women, things changed drastically after Mao came to power. In 1950, the government introduced a marriage law. This outlawed many old practices, such as arranged marriages, child marriages, killing of unwanted girl babies, and bigamy. The minimum age for marriage was fixed at 18 for women and 20 for men. Property no longer belonged to the husband alone, but was owned by both wife and husband. Divorce by mutual consent was introduced. In 1951, another law was passed which gave mothers maternity benefit of full wages for 2 months after the birth of the child.
The PRC shall suppress all counter-revolutionary activities, severely punish all GMD war criminals and other leading counter-revolutionary elements. Feudal landlords, capitalists and reactionary elements in general shall be deprived of their political rights. In 1950, when Mao passed the Agrarian Reform Law, the Speak Bitterness campaigns also started. These campaigns were organized so that peasants could denounce their landlords who had treated them badly in the past. These Speak Bitterness meetings were carried out with increasing violence, and often ended with the execution of landlords who had been particularly cruel to their tenants. During 1950 and 1951, the party organized mass rallies where public enemies and counter-revolutionaries were publicly tried. Around 1 million of these reactionaries were executed. During the Cultural Revolution, anybody who did anything remotely capitalist would be prosecuted by the Red Guards.
The People's Republic shall unite with all peace-loving and freedom-loving countries and people throughout the world, first of all with the USSR, all people's democracies, and all oppressed nations. Shortly after coming to power, Mao made a treaty of friendship, alliance, and mutual assistance with the Soviet Union. This provided China with financial aid and technical advice. This was not only to build good ties with the USSR, but was also used to fund the first 5-year plan.
Even before they started to put this common program into practice, they were already facing many difficulties. After the Civil War, agricultural output had dropped drastically, and the population had increased by a lot, causing famine. Inflation was very high, and so was unemployment. Transport, telecommunications, and energy systems were in chaos. Aside from all the problems in China itself, there was also the outside threat from Chiang Kai-shek in Taiwan.
After all these problems are sorted and the government was actually working, there were also some bad consequences that came out of their campaigns and laws.
In 1956, after the first 5-year plan, Mao started the 100 Flowers campaign for people to let off steam after the high-pressure work. However, some people spoke too freely for Mao's liking, and he clamped down on the critics. Censorship was very strict as well.
The land reforms into cooperatives and communes also didn't work very well. The communes became too big to be managed efficiently. The land was also on permanent lease to the government with no personal plots, which meant that the land no longer belonged to the peasants.
The Great Leap Forward did make China a lot more industrious. However, there were many bad consequences. The Backyard Steel campaign was a complete disaster. 3 million out of the 11 million tons produced were too impure to be used and had to be thrown away as scrap. So many people were taken away from their jobs to work at furnaces, especially from the fields, which had caused bad harvests. False accounts of grain harvest and bad weather caused major famine. Around 20 million people died from starvation and disease during 1959 and 1962.
To sum it up, the Common Program was a success, in some cases, but a failure in others. They did make the position of women equal to men, and China became a lot more industrialized. All so-called counter-revolutionaries and opponents were taken away and the CCP was saved. However, freedom of speech, thought, assembly, and everything else was destroyed, and the peasants did not own their own land in the end. The communists did a lot for China, but this all came at a very high price.